Good afternoon, everybody. Joining us live from the podcast room in Hab Project, Mexico City. I am Christopher Martin Burns. This is Renaissance Podcast. I am in Toronto, downtown on Bay Street. Beautiful sunny day here. As I say, joining us from Mexico City, my guest this week, my dear friend and founder of Elevar Salud, Mr. Vidit Gupta. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me. Beautiful day here in Mexico City as well after a significant tropical rain last night.
Really?
But good to be on the podcast. Your window looks much more brighter than mine.
You don't have a window. You look like you're in a bunker. I
well,
was just saying before I started recording, I always wondered what that room was for in Hub Project, and now it makes all the sense in the world. Podcast room.
It's actually It is. It's apparently a thing here that I'm just finding out today.
Okay. You're making full use of your membership, finally.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, got a lot to get through. Why don't we start at the beginning, as it were, and talk about your background, but maybe start on starting your childhood. I know you're very connected to where you grew up and your family. Great sources of inspiration for you. So why don't we talk about your childhood aspirations to start with, what you wanted to become, how that's led into everything else you've done, and then maybe how that takes us into the mission of Elevar as well. So let's start at the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, beginning, I was born in New Delhi, India. So I always say I'm designed in India. Grew up there till the age of 8. Then my family moved to South Africa for a little bit. I was there for a few years. And then from there on, I moved out to New York. And that's been the general trajectory of my childhood. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My grandfather rode a camel from the desert, the western part of India, to New Delhi when he was 14, having more than $2 in his pocket, and just an idea that he didn't want to grow up in desert and become a camel herder. And he started to work in a wholesale market where he was lifting, basically carrying heavy weights of spices from one trader to another. He accumulated some money over the next few years and started his own trading business. And that's how my family got into business. Everybody in my family has been involved in the same business. I have 3 uncles, my dad including 4 sons, and it's been a family enterprise now about 50 years old. And I was the black sheep who decided that I do not want to go into the family business. And I don't know if people know, but in India, the culture that I come from, if you decide to basically not go into the family business, you're sort of outcasted very quickly. So for me, growing up, I had 2 ambitions, 2 dreams that I wanted to do, both related to war and military. First was to become a fighter jet pilot. And that was ultimately, I used to draw planes and all of that. And that's what I really wanted to do. And the second one was a military strategist. I used to watch a lot of documentaries and everything on all the wars, the modern wars, and all the ones that happened before the modern warfare actually happened. And all of that, realized that, you know what, if I do either of those things, I will not make any money, and I will potentially die sooner than I should. So that led me to explore things outside of warfare. And then I decided to go to get my bachelor's in finance. And I decided to go work on Wall Street. I started at a small investment bank where I've worked for about 3 years, focused on restructuring. So this was post-financial crisis time. There were a lot of distressed assets on the street. And that's what I did for about 2.5 years. And then from there on, I went to work in private equity, again, focused on distressed debt and distressed assets, which frankly was essentially warfare. You are basically looking at things that nobody will touch. They are highly toxic. And you have to figure out a way around on, if there's any value in that. And if there's any value, how can we acquire that asset? And then how can we amplify the value and make some money out of that? That's what I did. And did that for about 8 years. And then I got married. And my wife did not like New York. She's not from New York. Just for background, my wife is from Germany, and it was the middle of pandemic, and we were October 25th, 2020. The day after we got married, and we came back to our wedded home as a wedded couple. Two things happened. Our neighbor died of COVID, bless his soul. And we were caught in a place where, like, look, the world may end tomorrow, and we want to be in New York, and be in this cold place, and not see sunlight, or should we take a chance and move out to somewhere warm and sunny? So that led us to, within a week of being married couple, packed our bags and move out to Mexico. So that's sort of like a little bit of background on what childhood was and how I came to be in Mexico, having no idea what we were going to do. I still had my job in private equity, and that's what I thought I will eventually continue to do.
Mm. And why Mexico? Was it like looking for a remote, safe place? I know you lived in San Miguel de Allende initially, out in the sticks.
Mhm.
Was it looking for that kind of remote safety, or was there something else about Mexico that drew you?
That was exactly that. I think not in a highly populated area, so somewhere out away from a major city. And yeah, we can work from home, and can walk out. There's a maybe a garden, some grass, and just enjoy being segregated from society in general, and keep our sanity. So that's why Mexico. And Mexico, frankly, was the one country that was open. My wife actually used to live in Mexico. She spent a lot of time. So it was a place that is very familiar to her and also to myself. So that was the whole idea to move out to Mexico.
Understood. And then, so how did Elevar start from there? I mean, why don't we why don't you first give like a quick introduction as to what Elevar is, Elevar Salud, your company which you founded. Um,
Mhm.
what is it, and what inspired you to start it?
Elevar Salud is a health tech platform. Elevar is something that an idea was not something that I thought about before. It was more situational. I think the world that we were living in at the point where even in places like the Western world in America, we were realizing there's so many gaps in the healthcare system. And then when we came down to Mexico, that reality just became a very rude awakening to a whole different level. And look, for me, I grew up in emerging markets. India, for example, has been infrastructurally is almost exactly the same as Mexico. The gaps are exactly the same. The consumer behavior is exactly the same. The way the kind of options that doctors have are almost exactly the same. So when we came down to Mexico, again, two things happened. First, my mom came to visit me, and from India, and her third night in Mexico, in this new country, in the middle of the night, I was woken up, and she was in terrible pain that was in her lower body. And this is something that happens to her every once in a while. It's a bit of a chronic pain that has been part of her life for the last 30 years, as long as I can remember. And it happens, and every time it happens, we have to reinvent the wheel. There's no cure for this, and we have to figure out what to do. The challenge this time, on top of that, was we're in a new country. And we have to figure out which doctor to go to. We have some idea what that is, but how to figure all of that out. So we basically went to a couple of hospitals the next day, a couple of private clinics in Mexico, and there was just nobody was able to give us an answer. Like the idea was, painkillers and let her ride out. uh, she has done in past, but we were seeking something. She was completely immobile. She could not get up, walk, anything. She was lying flat on the bed for um, when she was in that much pain. So we basically could not figure out what kind of doctor do we need to go to. Like, if the quality of the doctor that we're going to, is it good? Like, do they actually understand what my mom needs and all of that? And the experience that we were having were not nice. We booked an appointment. Just as an example, we booked 3 appointments. Only one of them actually happened. uh, Two of them, the the second appointment, that did not happen. Sorry, the first appointment that did not happen because we booked that appointment online on a local platform here, and it turns out that the doctor never got that notification in the calendar, so it was not integrated. So they actually were not here. They were in a different part of Mexico, in Merida, and so we wasted a lot of time waiting for that one. It ended up not happening. The third appointment was actually a telemedicine appointment with a doctor in Guadalajara, who deals with chronic pain. And that one did not happen because the doctor was unable to figure out how to be in front of the camera, how to actually take that appointment technically, technologically, was unable to figure out. So we wasted like 3 days trying to figure out doctors, chasing doctors, and they did not happen. Ultimately, my mom just got better, but it just naturally with painkillers. But that just left a pretty terrible taste in our mouth. And we were like, okay, how do people take care of their health? We are somebody, we can say, relatively speaking, people with privilege, we can spend money, we can pay the best doctor and whatever. It was a complete challenge. And then another thing happened. A few months later, a friend of mine came to visit from New York, just to take advantage of working from home. And as COVID was subsiding, and he had a very similar experience. He just one day woke up and he started to lose patches of hair in his beard. And that, as you can imagine, freaked us out.
Yeah.
He was staying with us at the time, and he came out one morning and he showed me what's going on. And it was kind of alarming and concerning to see that, like, literally a significant part of his beard is completely gone. There's just a patch. So, just like somebody would in that situation, we frantically started to search what could be causing this, what might this be, and all of that. And we just we ran all sorts of scenarios in our mind. Could be an autoimmune disorder, could be a dermatological problem, could be something else. And then, based on our assumptions, after Google search, we started to find doctors that can treat those things. And the same exact experience happened at that time one more time. We booked a few appointments. Most of them did not take place. Either the doctor canceled a day or a couple of hours before the appointment was supposed to take place, or we had another telemedicine appointment that did not take place, again due to technological problems on the doctor's side, the platform that they were using. And this became very concerning for us, because we really wanted to figure out, like, we were trying to figure out whether he should go back to New York and seek medical care over there, or continue his trip here. Maybe you can find a doctor over here. And ultimately, we found a doctor at a very well-known, one of the most prestigious doctors in Mexico, uh, in Mexico City. But that appointment was not available for up until was available 2 weeks in advance. So there was nothing available in that time. So, as you can imagine, it was a very difficult time for us to figure out what's going on and all of that. So ultimately, we figured out what was going on with my friend, and then I just like put on this the first year investment banking analyst hat. I'm like, okay, let's figure out what's going on here in this country. I've seen the same story happen in my home country of India, where similar experience. I grew up in almost exactly the same experience, but in the last 5 to 6 years, this is before 2020, things just drastically changed. And just the healthcare system, private sector and healthcare system just really picked up the slack where public sector was really lacking it.
Yeah.
And it was, cannot call it universal, but it was made very available to almost everybody. And then we're like, okay, why is that not happening here? And we found the gaps are exactly the same. in Mexico as they were in India. And the problem is, technologically speaking, digital transformation wise, Mexico is just far behind. So all the things that are happening in the world in healthcare as a sector. So I'm like, okay, so there's this, and then at that point I'm like, okay, somebody, is there somebody doing anything in this area or not? We found there's very little innovation happening. I'm like, okay, somebody has to do it. I just had personal experiences with two people that I really love, and if that is how people in general live here, then somebody needs to do something. In my time being in private equity, we analyzed a lot of healthcare deals. That was the play for the last 4 or 5 years, even pre-COVID. And we invested in a few things, notably a couple of companies in India. One of them actually did very, very well. And so I had some, from a distance experience, obviously not operating, but being them being my portfolio companies, analyzing what's working, what's not, the companies that failed, why they failed, the companies that succeeded, why did they succeed. So one thing led to another, and we just built out like a vision of what is the problem and how do we solve that. And that's how Elevar Salud came to exist. Sorry for the long-winded explanation over there.
No, it's good to hear, man. It's good to hear the full story. Not about your unfortunate unfortunate events, but I think thankfully everybody was okay in the end. Hey, look, it takes those kind of personal experiences sometimes to motivate you to do something about it and to change things. Um, so how long ago did you start Elevar? And I mean, you've talked a bit about the health, how you see the healthcare kind of system
Mhm.
in Mexico, or how it was at least a few years ago. Um, so, I mean, if we understand correctly, you wanted to bring digitized healthcare, integrate it into the Mexican system. Um, I mean, where do you even start with something like that?
Well, yeah. So you have to figure out like what we did. We had to figure out like what is the current state of healthcare in Mexico. What we found was there were three tiers of healthcare in Mexico. One is the very top tier private sector, which is completely inaccessible to 80% of the population, just because A, it is geographically centered in some major metropolitan areas only, and B, it's financially inaccessible. Like majority of people cannot afford it. We're talking about, and there's no existence of private insurance. Very few people have private insurance, about 7 to 8% of the population, depending upon what statistic you're looking at. So inaccessibility. Then there's public healthcare system, which is just like public healthcare system anywhere in the world. In your home country, in the UK, with NHS, it's the same. You have significant wait times. This
Oh yes,
quality of care is really terrible, and just as like it's bad. And then there's a third tier system, which is essentially like a very lower level. When I say lower level, in terms of quality, it's you have doctors who have very, very low entry fee, and you people go there for things like they have a flu or stomach ache or like diarrhea or food poisoning and stuff like that.
yeah,
People go to them for those doctors, and that's the limit of as advanced as they can go in treating their patients. So that leaves a significant amount of population basically having very little access because
mhm,
financially inaccessible, geographically inaccessible, quality wise, it sucks. So we're like, okay, we need to figure out. We have a segment of population that has disposable income, which is the Mexican middle class. So if you remove the top 20 to 25% of the population, and then economically speaking, and then if you remove the on the economical totem pole, if you remove the bottom 20 to 25% of the population, who will always most likely will never seek healthcare
right,
uh, anywhere, then that leaves essentially the entire Mexican middle class that have very little access. They have disposable income. They are educated. They are cognizant of their health. They want to take care of it, and there's nothing available. So for us, it's like, okay, we need to build a system that is catering to the pain points, that is uh, economically affordable, geographically decentralized, and And while doing that, another problem that we realized, there's no data that exists here.
Right.
So Chris goes to Dr. A month ago, and Chris goes to Dr. B a month later. There's no portability of data that is happening. So Chris has to, every time they go, you go from Dr. A to Dr. B, you have to tell everything, all the diagnoses that have happened, or prognosis, or all of that.
So there's no,
So then we're like,
there's
okay,
no
so
centralization of health records at all. It's all you're basically walking
exactly,
around with your own health records in your head.
exactly. And sometimes you don't have what you need, and so we're like, okay, we have to build a platform that is easily accessible, easily operable, and is based on data. And so is the foundation of Elevar Salud. And that's what we started conceptualizing Elevar Salud in late 2021.
Mhm.
And then started to lay the foundation by building our team, figuring out the right people, connecting with the right players here, from the hospital chains to doctors, and we had to do the whole groundwork. So that took us about 4 to 5 months in early 2022, and then we started to, once everything was all set, then we started to hire people in tech, on the medical side, and really laid the foundation of building the platform
Yeah.
late 2022.
Right. And then I think so. You got the platform up and running. How did you then go about kind of onboarding doctors? I mean, I presume that was your first step in terms of.
Of course. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, look, the Elevar Salud is essentially a healthcare marketplace. So as a typical marketplace, we have a supply side and a demand side. Doctors being the supply side, it's a chicken and egg thing. Do you get demand first, or do you get supply first? Supply first, and if demand is there's no supply, then it's a problem. So we thought it's going to be very complicated for us to acquire doctors, but as it turned out, it was actually fairly easy. What we realized, we were looking at the healthcare system in Mexico from patient perspective, and doctors have significant pain points. The biggest one is they don't make enough money. Like a general doctor working, coming out of medical school with a few years of experience, is making a little over what an Uber driver in Mexico City makes. So think about that. And so what happens is, majority of doctors are working 2 to 3 jobs, you know, at at a time, like in a week. They were taking extra hours, they're working night shift, they're working weekends, so they have no lifestyle whatsoever, and they're making barely enough money to get by. It's like, okay, so that's a major pain point. And then the second pain point is that once the doctor only have a couple of options here: go to private sector, very elusive, very, very difficult to get in. Only about 2% of graduating doctor class gets to go. The remaining doctors have option to go work in public health, which is, you kind of start losing the passion when you work in public anything, especially in healthcare. And right, and then the third one is working in the lower tier of the section. So we're like, okay, so this Mexico is actually not doctor deficient, it's actually more doctor inefficient. So we started to just get on uh, um, network in all the doctor WhatsApp groups. We started to go to medical schools, met the careers department, the professors or deans, and be like, hey, we're building this. We need doctors who graduated top 20% of your class, have 2 to 3 years of clinical experience already, and we want to bring them on board. So multiple channels, and we were actually able to acquire doctors quite fast. We were able to build a pipeline of doctors within a week of about 400 doctors, just physicians, because that was our focus at that point.
Incredible. Um, so, without going into the minutiae of platform development and so on, I remember I think you and I met like late last year, so like I don't know, 7 or 8 months ago.
That is
When we
correct.
met, you were talking about you basically had built the beta platform, right? And you were kind of in the process of putting that out to test. I mean, I guess where were the initial flaws? Like, where were the initial like problems with it? Or I mean, how smooth was getting this system up and running in a beta version? And then how have you gone about since then actually taking that live if it has got that far? Um,
Hmm.
and I mean, how are you going about kind of customer acquisition? Um, what are your strategies around that?
Absolutely. So look, when we started to build a platform, we had a challenge. The way we had our product development life cycle. We're building a very substantial product that would have taken us a very long time to build, and so in about 2 months in, while we're doing that, we're like, well, we need to start testing the market. We need to start figuring out, what are the actual micro level pain points that patients have that we can actually address and take more of a sniper approach rather than a spray and pray approach. So we're like, okay, so let's figure out what is one thing that everybody in Mexico uses almost every day on their phone, and it is WhatsApp. An average about 93% of Mexicans use WhatsApp. For all sorts of communication. Sorry, I stay corrected. 73% of Mexicans use WhatsApp, not 93, to stay in touch with almost everything. It's the most used app. It's like, okay, let's build a platform where WhatsApp basically becomes the channel where a patient can come in
Yeah,
and talk about anything they're going through. This could be, hey, I'm not feeling well today. I'm nauseous. To, hey, I'm trying to lose some weight, to whatever. I just did this test. I do not understand the results, or I was diagnosed with something serious. I don't know what the next steps would be. Those were our assumptions. Let's build something and start collecting data. So we built that while we were building the main platform on the back, because that was relatively easy to build. And we had some assumptions. Some of them were proven right. Some of them were proven wrong. What we figured out that the major pain points that are faced by Mexican patients are actually for women. It's about women's health, which has been a major driver, and women's health is just more complex. It's questions relating to their hormonal cycles, all the way to mental health, and then everything that centers around women, pediatric care, women taking care of their children. You know, that was one. The and the way we were able to collect all the data is we launched the service and we did zero marketing, no marketing at all. And the service became, sorry to say the word viral in a healthcare perspective, basically went a little bit viral. And we just kept getting people coming in and asking about everything, about, hey, I'm feeling anxiety, I'm feeling depressed, to I'm facing this, I'm a woman, 35-year-old living here, all of that. So with that, we collected data on women's health is a major problem here. Mental health is a major problem here. Sexual health is a major problem here. Uh, any kind of skin-related problems is a major problem here. We thought a lot of data, a lot of patient flow that we will get will be for diabetic patients, because a lot of people in Mexico have diabetes. Very little people came in that area, less than 1%. So now that we were able to identify that in over the last 3 to 4 months, now we are building the platform, the rest of the platform catering to these areas. So because we're not building a hospital that can come in for everything, we want to remain become profitable and deploy our assets in the most productive way.
sure.
I don't know
So
if that answers your question, Chris.
yeah, it did. I mean, if you ever needed some resonance that there was a need for it, I think you found it pretty quickly
Exactly.
with zero marketing.
Exactly. Look, everything is data driven. So we just wanted to have data on who are the people that we are catering to, what are their needs,
Yeah,
and then how do we best provide the best service in a very accessible way.
yeah, very good. So, um, I mean, moving on from that, like I know this was something you were incredibly passionate about to the extent where you funded a lot of this early stuff yourself, which
Hmm.
is quite incredible in and of itself. Since then, I know you've been working on raising capital. I know you've had some outside investment. I know you're looking for the right strategic partners to help with, obviously, with financing and help you share the burden of that, but also people who can really add value and help you expand, and kind of take it through the startup phase into a growth phase and really kick on from there. So, I mean, you and I know very well this the environment. Certainly, the last 6 months to a year has been difficult. Raising for startups is not as easy as it was, and certainly you are faced with the added difficulty of doing this in Mexico, an
Hmm.
emerging market, one where there is a lot of prejudice against, one where there is a perceived level of risk, whether that's accurate or not. Um, you're facing an uphill battle. How have you found that? Like, how do you find the current fundraising environment, and how have you been coping with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we bootstrapped the company because we wanted to really understand what are we building, and be very sure about when the right time for us to go to the investors would be. So for us, that has been a very productive exercise. Obviously, spending our own money is uh, always difficult.
Yeah,
But we did that in a most efficient way, and I think it taught us to when it's your own money, and then you realize how to efficiently spend it and how to get the biggest bang out of that. Fundraising environment. I think when I speak to all the fellow founders and friends like yourself, and we decided to start our companies at the worst time possible in the last since the financial crisis, really, since '08. So the fundraising environment is in a crunch. It's everybody knows that. I'm sure every founder is facing the same things as we face. So when we started fundraising, we were able to. Our strategy was to collect angel investors, but be very strategic about them. Investors who can help us navigate the choppy waters of Mexico in every way, system wise, and all of that. And but more importantly, angel investors who really believe in the idea, who really see what we have found and can see how we are solving a major problem, um, and can see wh- when we get to the point that this whole thing is up and running. They can open doors for us when we need to do things that will help us accelerate um, our product development faster.
yeah,
So angel investors for us has been was easier. On the venture capital side, it's been difficult. It's been what we found very quickly that the venture capital scene in Mexico has been very focused on, for example, only fintech, which has been the flavor of the month for the last 4 or 5 years, basically since the early days of venture capital in Mexico or Latam. So we found that people were just not, there was a big gap in understanding of the healthcare system. And if you talk to, and this is not a universal thing, which this is something that we found in many cases, not all of them. Um, found there's a major disconnect. An average, not an a Mexican investor is somebody who is has access to great healthcare, so they actually do not understand the pain points when it comes to the middle class of Mexico. So to tell them a story, we found that there were significant gaps in what we found and to their knowledge. So that was tough. So we had to really refine our story and having them understand, okay, this is what's happening here. Uh, so we found that getting traction with local investors was difficult. So we shifted our focus completely to investors north of the border in the US, where health tech as an ecosystem is extremely advanced. In Mexico, we are building brick and mortar of healthcare in a way, employing technologies like AI, but we are still building the digital brick and mortar. When you talk to investors north of the border, these guys are very advanced. They're getting deep in deep tech and AI, so they have already gone through this life cycle in the US and other parts of the world. So for us, connecting with them was a lot easier, and envisioning with them and sharing our vision with them has been a lot easier. But so that's been our experience in the last 4 months when we really started to push for institutional investors. We have seen slowly the mindset changing. There have been some interesting healthcare deals that have taken place in the last couple of months. So the way we look at it, look, the fintech cycle is there's a lot of innovation that still needs to happen in fintech, and it will be, but the deal flow is very low. But when you look at macroeconomically, healthcare is a major sector that requires a lot of innovation. And I think people or investors here are really warming up to that idea and actually seeking deals. We in the last 2 months, we had three inbounds from Latin American venture capital funds about what are we doing with healthcare. The sector is looking very, very interesting.
Yeah,
So it's shifting.
yeah. That's good to hear. And are you finding from other Latin American investors in other parts south of Mexico, are you finding like they're looking at you almost as like a test market for what they could do in their own countries?
You mean
It's
south of the south?
investment interested in investing into you so that you can scale it in Mexico so that it can then you can transpose that onto into other nations in Latin America.
Absolutely. Look, I think the what the problems in Mexico are mostly problems all over Latin America.
Yes.
So when you think about building something in Mexico, it's not too far off to think that this product is scalable in other parts of Latam. Places
Right.
that come to mind are the natural ones, the Colombia. They have slightly better healthcare system than Mexico, than ours. Other places that come to mind are Argentina, the
Mhm.
educated population, pretty good healthcare system, but there are similarities to what they are. So when we talk to our investors, once the conversation starts rolling, the question do come up: do we think that this platform is scalable outside of Mexico? And our answer always to that is, look, first of all, Mexico is a huge market.
Yeah.
And so once we figure it out here, then yes, the product is scalable. Obviously, not one size fits everywhere, but it has definitely synergies in other parts of Latam. So that's been an interest for non-Mexican investors.
Mm.
For us, we speak to folks out in Brazil or Argentina or
Mhm.
Colombia. And how are you solving it in Mexico, and what can you do in countries outside of Mexico?
Yeah. Interesting. And how are you? I mean, how are you finding? How are you finding this is changing people's lives so far? Like, have you? I know you've got a
Incredibly.
lot of amazing testimonials and case studies from people that have used your platform. That
Hmm.
must be very kind of warming, I guess, in and of itself. Like that must keep you going when times are difficult with fundraising, when times are difficult, do I continue bootstrapping this? Like all these kind of things, like every day is a struggle as a startup founder. Like how have you, has that kept you going? I guess like the fact that this is making such a difference to normal people's lives, that must spur you on.
Oh, absolutely. Look, as we said, we launched our MVP in February of this year, and we had expectations that we're going to do certain amount of traffic, but the amount of traffic that we have gotten is actually way over than what we wildly expected. So that for us is a testament that there's such a need. We have people. To give you some examples, we have patients we have a 30% recurring rate with patients at the moment, which is incredible for a service that is not even broadcasted or marketed.
Yes.
And the recovery rates are for both chronic and non-chronic conditions. People are coming to ask us about questions. What's happening more importantly is right now the service is just a WhatsApp chat. So we intake a patient. The patient asks a question. They can share any media or whatever that is, and we advise them. Looks like you need this is you have a skin rash. Looks like this may be something you ate. So pretty general. It will subside with time. Or this requires further analysis. You need to go see a dermatologist. When we get to that stage, I think the response to us has been 40% of patients are asking, can I have a consultation with you right now? Can I pay and have a consultation? So that we expected that number to be 10 to 20%. And that number again has also far surpassed. So things like that. And now we are based on that input, we are building our telemedicine platform, which we are beta testing right now, which we'll be launching soon. So based on this input for us has been what has kept us going. Building a startup, health tech startup especially, is a tactical warfare. And this is these small wins are the ones that are really keep us going and keep building. And frankly, they enrich our story. When we talk to our investors, we have raised about uh, half of our round already in the last month and a half, when we really started to push fundraising, when we found the market has been validated. And it's good to see demand from patients, and it's good to see what we are seeing and how we convert tell that into a story to investors is being entertained, analyzed, and put money behind.
Yeah, I think I've seen this across most deals that I've worked on recently. Like, find the right people, tell them the right story, and help them see the picture that you can see, and you can still raise. Like, it's still doable. You've just got to, in
Absolutely.
some cases, you've got to cut out the middleman. Sometimes you've got to go around the venture fund. Sometimes you've got to go straight to people who it's their own money that they're playing with, people who actually give a shit. About solving big problems, about investing for impact rather than just simply financial returns. Um, I'll be talking next week. My guest will be a partner of mine in Toronto. We'll be talking a lot about what we've been doing recently um, to basically cut out venture funds in the nicest possible way. I mean, I've got a lot of friends that work for funds, a lot of friends who are great VCs, but at the end of the day, VCs have promised a certain return to their LPs, and if the environment isn't reflective of that for them to invest, if they can't get that, they're not going to play. They're not going to invest. So you know, there's very little point in dealing directly with a lot of them right now, because for the next, probably till the end of this year at least, things aren't going to be as fluid in with venture funds. But I know what you've been doing, what I've been doing. Like, we've been going to direct investors, going to angels, going to family offices, going to the people who back funds, and telling them the right story, and helping them see that, yes, it's not an ideal investment environment at the moment, but at the end of the day, the problems are still there. The
Absolutely.
problems that we're trying to all solve are still there. They still exist. People are still suffering from them. So
Mhm.
you either do the right thing and you make a couple of less percentage points in the short term, but still make good money, or you just sit on your hands. And who wants to do that? You know, and I think
No.
that you've found some traction there, and that's really good to see.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I think having friends like, the building a startup could be a very it could be a very lonely thing to do sometimes, right? And what I have found, the best way to build a startup and to keep your sanity is have friends, friends who are founders, who are in the same battle as you are, who have seen their wins and losses, and who can give you advice and you can give them your piece of advice. And I think something that's how you and I really connected over the last 6 months that you were in Mexico City, just comparing notes. And your help to us has been remarkable. I think our friendship started as friends, and then yeah, some of the connections that you've made for us has been really important for us. And I think that's the ecosystem, when you think about that. And I understand venture capitalists pain points too. They have to answer their lps are very tough. Fundraising for them is not easy, although there have been big funds raised, but there are some other funds that are suffering to raise at the moment. So all of that, so I fully empathize with that. But I think, my what I say would work for us is really is bootstrapping. Uh, really put our money where, our mouth where our money is, and really understanding what is happening, and then be able to tell a story. Look, we don't need money right now to burn it to figure out if there is a need for this product. We already figured that out. Now is the time that we need to scale it, and for that we need capital and we need smart money. And that's the I would advise people, really figure out your product and the market that you're trying to build the product for, and get the story right. That worked for us. We did not have our story right the first time we started to fundraise, and then when we took a break, got it straightened out. And after that, it's been fairly easy.
Yeah, yeah. Good. And how do you find, I mean, I spoke about this a bit with Ritik last week. Like, how do you find the startup ecosystem in Mexico? I mean, my personal experience there was I was blown away by it. Like, the scene in Mexico
Amazing.
is incredible. How do you find it? How much easier has that made it in building in a very difficult environment? And what do you see as the future for startups and technology development in Mexico in general?
Absolutely. I think the startup scene here, I was frankly very surprised too. I was not aware that it is this dynamic. It is really, really amazing. I've met some very inspiring founders. I have met some very inspiring investors as well, who want to support these inspiring founders. But,
Yeah.
the pain points in Mexico again are so significant, and these are again brick and mortar infrastructural pain points that the only way to solve them is not by building, for example, in our case, we're not going to go build clinics like America did or hospitals like Western Europe did and put a doctor in every zip code. It's impossible.
Nobody's ever going to bankroll that.
Exactly, exactly. So, and I think those pain points exist still in fintech. Those pain points exist in health tech. Those pain points exist in marketplaces and e-commerce. What's interesting now is in the last since the beginning of this year, I've seen some very interesting deep tech funders coming in to play. So I think Mexico as a technology destination has a very bright future. It's the most populated Spanish-speaking country in LATAM. It's a lot of things that happen here. Travel south, to rest of the places, and I think it's poised to be a very, very comprehensive ecosystem. And we are seeing that every day. Every day, I meet a new founder in a new field that I was not expecting to meet. I think you sort of experienced something very similar being here too, right? I know we were chatting one time, and you were like, "Wow, this is crazy."
I honestly I couldn't believe it. I mean, look, I didn't really know what to expect. Obviously, mutual friend of ours, who we've both known for a long time, said to come over and that there was a lot happening there. But when I got there, I mean, I was blown away by
Hmm.
Mexico City in itself. But I honestly, I didn't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting there to be somewhere, so many incubators, like places like Hub Project, co-workings, like so many expats, but also so many locals, like really getting involved in innovation in the startup scene. And I mean, it is, I've seen stuff in Mexico, like innovation wise, that I haven't seen anywhere else in the world, like genuinely.
Yeah,
And those are Mexican born ideas, not just in healthcare, but in a range of different industries. Like, it's incredible, and the buzz that generates, and the kind of the drive that gives you to keep going, um, and really start to believe that yes, Mexico has its problems, which are well publicized, but there's a lot there to be positive about. There really is. And it's an incredible country with incredible people. And when you're working in that kind of environment in that kind of country, it's truly something special. And I think the sky is the limit for Mexico. I mean, it's one of those places that when you come from the West, so to speak, when you go down there from the US or go over from Europe, and we are, let's face it, things have been tough in our countries like the last little while. Like, it feels like we're in the decline. When you go somewhere like Mexico, yes, you take a few steps back in a few different ways, but you also see, like, wow, imagine how this is going to be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. It's like it's a country in the ascendancy, and it kind of gives you renewed hope in the world in general. And that's what emerging markets are all about. Um, People sometimes, I think, look at capitalizing on these places or whatever. It's bullshit. You see the people that actually go to these places and actually innovate and actually help and actually build an ecosystem connected to the one that's already there. Um, it's fucking incredible, man. It renewed my love for working in the startup field. And regardless of how difficult an environment we've been operating in globally, like Mexico will, if if you're wondering whether to carry on or not, go to Mexico, and it will blow you away. Yeah, yeah, sustainable growth, not hyper growth, which is ultimately going to venture. Well, yeah, it's doing things in the right way, which is arguably not how they have been done for a long time. So it's great to see. Look, I know you've got to get on with your day. But yeah, look, I really appreciate you doing this. Like, you know, you know how much I love you. You know how much of a difference you made in my life. Um, I'll forever thank you for the influence you've had on me and introducing me to my girlfriend. You've made a massive difference in my life, and I will always support you and Elevar and anything else you do in any way I possibly can. Um, and we'll look forward to seeing you in January when Kiki and I come back for a couple of months. For sure. If you guys are in Europe, we'd love to catch up. So yeah, just keep us posted. But yeah, man, we'll keep going. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk and tell the world about what you're doing. And yeah, onwards and upwards. Sure. Absolutely, absolutely, brother. All right, have a good one. Talk soon. Okay, thank you, Vidit. So finishing off next week. I just referenced this a minute ago. Next week, my guest will be Ashley Martis, CEO and founder of Startup Fuel here in Toronto. We have some huge announcements on the work we've been doing recently in the last month or two to completely reshape the venture capital model and offer much more efficiency and value to both startups and LPs. Massive announcements coming next week, which we are really excited to share with you. That will be the first Renaissance podcast recorded live in person in our studio in Toronto. Shout out to Con Arts for letting us use their beautiful space to do that. So looking forward to that, and also looking forward to seeing everybody who is attending the Startup Visa Summit next Thursday, the 13th in Toronto, which will be focused on making immigration for innovators, founders, and investors easier and attracting more talent and investment into Canada. Happy Friday, everybody. Make sure your weekend is full of love wherever you are. Renaissance Podcast Episode 3 wrap. Thank you.